Some people search for motivation, like chasing fireflies in the dark, a spark here, a flash there, but it never lasts. We don't need another spark. We need a fire that stays, not the kind that burns out overnight, but the kind that becomes part of who we are, quiet, relentless, unshakable. In a world of noise, Stoicism is the silence that speaks, not loud, but clear, not fast, but true. We're not here to get pumped. We're here to get grounded, to build a core that doesn't fall apart when life gets hard, to move without chasing, to lead without shouting. This is not about pretending to be strong. It's about being still enough to find the real strength, the kind that doesn't show on the surface, but keeps us standing when everything else breaks. If you've ever felt empty, lost, or tired of starting over, this is where it changes, not with noise, but with something deeper. So take a breath, let it settle. We're going in. We live in a world that worships noise, that rewards reactivity, that pushes us to move fast. Even when we feel lost, we scroll, we consume, we chase more and become less. But what if stillness wasn't weakness? What if silence was a kind of power? The Stoics knew something most people today forget, that peace is not found, it's built. One moment, one breath, one mindset at a time. We're not here for inspiration, we're here for transformation, the kind that doesn't wear off in 3 days. So stay, sit with this, let it challenge you, let it change you. And if something hits you along the way, drop it in the comments. There's strength in shared clarity. Now, let's begin. We think it's the world that wears us down. The deadlines, the noise, the pressure, but most of the time, it's not out there, it's the voice inside. Lesson 1. The voice that breaks us. It doesn't scream, it slides in the pause before a decision, in the silence after a failure, in the moment. Just before we try again, you're not ready. You'll mess it up. They probably don't even notice you. We tell ourselves it's just caution, just self-awareness, just being realistic. But the truth is, it's fear in disguise. This voice wasn't born with us. It was built, layer by layer, from words that weren't ours, but became our own. Parent who only praised perfection, a teacher who called us average, a friend who left when we needed them most. Little by little, we let those moments define us, and once that voice moved in, it never left. The Stoics knew this voice well, but they didn't try to shout over it. They didn't argue with it. They simply chose another one. They built a voice of reason, of clarity, of strength that didn't need to prove itself. Because here's the truth, the voice that breaks us is only as loud as the silence we leave behind. So if we want to feel different, we have to speak different to ourselves. And that starts now. Where does that voice come from? Most people think it's just part of their personality. But that's a lie. No one is born thinking they're not enough. No one enters this world afraid to try. That voice was planted. Maybe it started with a single sentence, a look, a silence, when we needed words the most. Maybe it came from a father who only noticed mistakes, a mother who called fear weakness, a world that only claps when we win, but vanishes when we fall. And little by little, we stopped trusting ourselves, not because we failed, but because we believed their version of our failure. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus was born a slave. He had no freedom, but they never broke his mind. Why? Because even in chains, he chose what voice to believe. It wasn't the insults, it wasn't the shame. It was his response to it all. That built his strength. That voice inside us, it may have been planted without permission, but we don't have to water it. We can choose another seed, another script, another story. And the first step is knowing it was never really ours to begin with. Why do we believe it? Why do we trust the voice that cuts us down? but question the one that lifts us up. Because the hurt feels familiar, because pain has a pattern, and we confuse repetition with truth. We think, if I've always felt this way, it must be real. But that's not truth. That's trauma on loop. The brain is built for survival, not happiness. It remembers pain, so we don't repeat it. But when the pain comes from within, the cycle never ends. So we normalize self-doubt. We call it humility. We call it realism. We even call it wisdom. But the Stoics called it what it is: distortion. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. What breaks us isn't what happens, it's what we keep telling ourselves after it does." That voice stays because we feed it with comparison, with perfectionism, with the fear of being seen, and still not enough. But here's the truth no one tells us. The voice that made us fall can't be the one that helps us rise. To move forward, we have to stop listening to what we've outgrown. So how do we silence it? Not by yelling back, not by pretending. It's not there. And definitely not by drowning it in fake positivity. The Stoics didn't run from the voice, they faced it, named it, then retrained it. They didn't say, "Don't feel fear." They said, "Fear is just data, don't obey." They didn't say, "Ignore failure." They said, "Failure is feedback, use it." Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself every day, not to stay strong, but to stay clear. He knew the battlefield wasn't the empire, it was his own mind. The Stoics didn't chase self-esteem, they chased self-control. Because when you can't control what you hear, you learn to control how you respond. So next time that voice shows up, pause, ask, is this true? Is it helpful? Would Epictetus listen to this? Then rewrite it, not with fluff, but with facts. Instead of, "I'll never be enough," try, "I've made it through worse." Instead of, "They won't accept me," try, "Their opinion isn't my compass." The voice might stay, but it doesn't get to drive anymore. In the end, it's not about silencing every thought. It's about choosing which ones to amplify. We don't beat the noise by shouting louder. We beat it by becoming still. Still enough to hear our own truth, still enough to catch the lie before it lands, still enough to remember that not every voice deserves a response. Most people drown in the noise. But the Stoics, they became the calm in the storm. They didn't need validation, they didn't need applause, they didn't even need to be understood. They just needed clarity and courage. That's the invitation, not to shout, not to prove, but to return to something quiet and strong, because the voice that saves us won't be the loudest, it'll be the one we choose in stillness. Failure doesn't break us. The story we attach to it does. It's not the fall that defines us, it's what we believe while we're still on the floor. Lesson 2. You are not in your failures. Failure isn't the enemy, our interpretation of it is. We think failing means we are a failure, but that's like saying a storm means the sky is broken. It's just weather, it comes, it passes. But somewhere along the line, we made it personal. We stopped seeing setbacks as chapters and started treating them as our whole story. One bad pitch, one lost job, one rejection, and suddenly the voice kicks in again. "See, told you. You're not built for this. Give it up." But here's what the Stoics understood. The fall isn't the failure. The fall is the teacher. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The moment we make failure means something about our worth. We've lost control of the narrative. So what if we didn't flinch when we failed? What if we just learned? Not punished ourselves, not spiraled, just paused, looked it in the eye and asked, "What now?" Because failure isn't final, it's a fork in the road, and every time we face one, we get to choose what it makes of us. The Stoics didn't fear failure. They reframed it. They didn't ask, "Why did this happen to me?" They asked, "What can this build in me?" That's the Stoic reframe. Pain is not a punishment, it's raw material. Every rejection becomes redirection. Every fall becomes training. Every loss becomes a mirror. Not to shame us, but to sharpen us. Marcus Aurelius didn't escape hardship. He ruled through plague, war, betrayal. But in his journal, he never wrote, "This isn't fair." He wrote, "This is what I'm here for." Most people crumble when things go wrong. But Stoics get curious. What is this teaching me? What part of me is growing right now? What strength is being built? It's not optimism, it's ownership, because when we see failure not as defeat, but as design, we become unbreakable. Imagine failure not as an end, but as a blank canvas, clean, silent, full of potential. Most people see failure as a stain. But Stoics? They see it as space, room to create something new. A lost job is a chance to redraw direction. A heartbreak is a chance to redefine love. A collapse is a chance to rebuild stronger. We don't always choose the blank canvas, but we always choose the brush. And that brush is made of what we've learned, what we've endured, and what we still believe is possible. Stoicism teaches us this. We're not victims of failure. We're artists in motion. The question isn't will we fall again? It's what will we paint next? Scars don't mean we're broken. They mean we've healed and kept going. We hide them, we cover them up, because the world teaches us that perfect is better than resilient. But perfection is fragile. Resilience is permanent. Every scar is a sentence, a quiet reminder. I've been there, and I made it through. The Stoics didn't erase their pain. They embraced it, turned it into wisdom, carried it like armor, not to show off, but to keep moving. Because what hurts us most is often what builds us best. We don't need to pretend we were never knocked down. We just need to remember we got back up, and that's where real strength lives. Not in the clean, but in the cracked and courageous. Rebuilding doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be real. We don't need to prove we've changed. We don't need applause for standing back up. We just need to keep walking, quietly, firmly, forward. That's what Stoicism gives us. Not a life without failure, but a life where failure stops being the end. It becomes a door, a turning point, a deeper kind of strength that no one can see, but everyone can feel, so we rebuild. Not to be admired, not to be praised, but because it's who we are, not perfect, not untouched, but undefeated. We hold on, not because it's helping, but because we're afraid of what's on the other side. Letting go isn't weakness, it's a power move. Lesson 3, letting go is a power move. Letting go sounds soft, passive, easy, but it's one of the hardest things a human can do because holding on feels like control, like we're protecting something, like if we grip tighter, we won't lose. But most of the time, what we're holding on to is already gone. The Stoics saw this clearly. They didn't beg for permanence. They trained for release. They understood one thing that most people never will. The tighter you grip something fragile, the faster it breaks. We don't just hold on to people, we hold on to ideas, versions of ourselves, things we were taught to chase that no longer make sense. Dreams we outgrew, but feel guilty letting die. Sometimes we cling to pain because it's the only thing that feels familiar. A relationship that drained us, a title that doesn't define us anymore, a failure we've already survived, but still replay in our heads every night. Letting go doesn't mean we stop caring. It means we stop carrying what isn't ours anymore. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." It wasn't just theory, it was survival. He let go of control in a time of war, betrayal, disease. He let go of the need to be loved by everyone. to be remembered, to be right, because he knew what's for us stays, what isn't falls away no matter how tight we cling. Letting go is not weakness, it's clarity, it's peace, it's power, and if something is meant to return, it will not need to be chased. So the next time we feel something slipping, maybe, just maybe, we let it fall, and in that space we don't lose control. We finally gain it. Most people think letting go means giving up, walking away, admitting defeat. But Stoicism teaches us something very different. Letting go is not surrender. It's selection. It's choosing what deserves our time, our energy, our peace. We are not obligated to hold every weight handed to us. Not every conversation deserves an answer. Not every opinion deserves a reaction. Not every connection deserves a forever. The truth is, we lose more by holding on than we ever do by letting go. A toxic friendship, a job that crushes our soul, a version of ourselves that was only meant to get us this far. It's not our fault we carried them, but it is our choice to set them down. The Stoics practiced this daily. Detachment wasn't coldness, it was discipline, a training of the mind to know. This is not mine to fix. This is not mine to keep. This is not mine to carry anymore. Seneca wrote, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." And what is worry, if not the refusal to release something we cannot control? Letting go isn't a loss. It's a refinement, a clearing of space, so that something more aligned, more honest, more essential can finally breathe. We often confuse effort with value, as if the harder we try to hold something, the more it must matter. But not everything heavy is important. Some things are just heavy. The strongest people we know aren't the ones who hold on the longest. They're the ones who know when to let go. So here's a question worth asking. What's taking up space that no longer deserves it? And what would happen if today we let it go? We grow up being told that ignoring something is weak, cowardly, avoidant. But there's a difference between escape and intention. Sometimes ignoring isn't running away, it's rising above. Not everything deserves our reaction. Not every insult deserves a defense. Not every storm deserves our full attention. Because some things only have power when we feed them. The Stoics knew this long before psychology caught up. They trained their attention like warriors, not with swords, but with silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. No opinion, no energy wasted, no emotional rent paid." Most people think wisdom is about knowing everything, but real wisdom is knowing what not to engage with. Some arguments are traps. Some chaos is bait. Some drama was never yours to fix in the first place. And the more we get pulled into things that don't matter, the less we have left for what truly does. We don't ignore because we're passive. We ignore because we're focused. Because peace isn't found by winning every fight. It's found by refusing the ones that cost too much of our soul. Imagine someone throws a burning torch at you. You can either catch it or step aside and let it fall. That's what intentional ignoring looks like. It's not indifference, it's discernment. A trained mind knows when to speak and when to stay still, knows when to engage and when to protect the inner calm. We live in a world that tries to provoke us every second, and the real power is not reacting to every hit, not because we can't, but because we don't have to. That is not weakness. That is mastery. That is Stoicism. Think of your mind like a garden, a sacred space. Not everyone gets in. Not everything deserves to grow. But most people leave the gates wide open. They let every opinion walk in. Every insult plant a seed. Every fear overwater the soil. And then they wonder why nothing peaceful survives. The Stoics understood this early. They knew the mind wasn't just a battlefield. It was a garden, and like any garden, what we tolerate grows. Let anger in often enough, it becomes a tree. Let resentment sit too long, It grows roots. Let doubt run wild. It chokes out clarity. So what do? We become the gardener. We stop blaming the weather. We stop blaming the visitors, and we start protecting the soil. Every day becomes a choice. What gets planted, what gets pulled, what gets pruned back. So something better can rise. Sometimes that means letting go of old beliefs. Sometimes it means saying no to what once felt familiar. Sometimes it means walking away from people we once watered endlessly who never blew back. Marcus Aurelius didn't try to fix every broken system. He fixed what he could control, his inner world, his choices, his focus, his boundaries. And that's the core of this lesson. We don't need to control everything outside us to create something beautiful within us. Our peace is not public property. Our focus is not free-for-all. This is our garden, our rules, our responsibility. So ask yourself today, what weeds have I let grow too long? And what would happen if I finally pulled them out? Not everything that falls apart is a tragedy. Sometimes it's a reveal. We don't lose things we truly needed. We lose things we once clung to because we didn't yet know how to let go. Letting go doesn't make us colder. It makes us clearer. Clear on what matters. Clear on what drains. Clear on what deserves a seat at our table and what never did. Most people mistake chaos for passion, but Stoics choose peace, not because they fear intensity, but because they know its cost. Peace is not passive. It's not soft. It's not the absence of noise. It's the presence of power, held quietly. It's walking away from arguments that go nowhere. It's turning off thoughts that scream lies. It's choosing a quiet mind over a noisy room. The world doesn't reward stillness. It rewards reaction, speed, drama. But the Stoic rewrites that rule. I won't trade my peace to win a point. Because what's the use in being right if it robs you of rest? What's the point of proving yourself if you lose yourself in the process? So we draw the line, not with noise, but with silence that says, this far, no further. That's how peace is built. Not all at once, but moment by moment, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. Let go of what blurs your clarity. Release what warps your center. Protect the space that lets your soul breathe. Not everything deserves access, and not everything lost is worth finding again. Power isn't always loud. Some of the strongest people we'll ever meet say the least, because real strength doesn't announce itself. It just endures. Lesson 4. Silence is a weapon. Silence is not empty. It's strategic. Most people fill silence with fear, with noise, with distraction. They can't sit still because the moment gets too loud inside. But the Stoics, they trained in it. They knew silence wasn't absence. It was ammunition. Words can be twisted, emotions can be used. But silence is power no one can touch. When someone insults you and you say nothing, you've already won. When life throws chaos and you don't flinch, you've already mastered it. Because silence isn't avoidance, it's control. We've been taught that speaking up takes strength. That reaction to relevance, that louder, that bolder. But often the loudest voice in the room is the most insecure. Real power is quiet, like gravity, like trust, like the pull of the moon. It moves everything, but says nothing. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." He didn't mean to stay silent in injustice. He meant know when your voice serves and when it simply adds more noise. Stoicism isn't about muting who we are, it's about refining it. So that when we do speak, it cuts clean, it holds weight. There's a silence that shrinks, but there's a silence that dominates. The kind that makes people lean in, the kind that says, I don't need to prove anything. So here's the question, what would shift in our lives if we stopped reacting to be heard and started responding to be effective? What if we used silence as a weapon of peace, a tool of strategy, a shield against chaos? Because once you stop needing the last word, you get the lasting word. And that is the power of stillness. We live in a world that reacts, fast, loud, instant. One post, one comment, one headline, and everyone has something to say. But here's what no one tells us. The first to react is usually the least in control. The Stoics didn't suppress emotion. They studied it, sat with it, let it lose its sharp edge before they moved. Because in that pause lives our power, the pause between the trigger and the choice, the pause between the insult and our reply, the pause between the urge and the regret. Anyone can speak fast, but few can sit still and think. Seneca wrote, "If you wish to be loved, love." But what if we updated that? If you wish to be respected, resist the urge to react. Most people think silence means defeat, but it means dominance over self. When someone lashes out and we don't answer, that's strength, not weakness. When something offends us and we examine instead of explode, that's mastery, not apathy. Silence doesn't mean we don't care. It means we care enough to protect what chaos tries to steal: reputation, energy, composure, time. Silence is the border between us and the mess trying to invade. Imagine every reaction as a transaction. What are we paying? Just to be right. Because some arguments cost too much, some responses trade clarity for ego, and some moments are best left unsaid. That's the Stoic pause. A discipline, a doorway, a weapon. So next time the world tries to pull a reaction, try this. Breathe, hold, choose. Then ask, is this worth my peace? If the answer is no, let silence speak for you. There's a strength most people never talk about. The strength to withhold, to not reply, to not explain, to not defend, even when every nerve inside wants to. Because the truth is, power isn't always shown in what we give. Sometimes it's revealed in what we keep. The Stoics knew this long before it became modern wisdom. They understood that words can build, but they can also bleed. And sometimes withholding a word is what keeps the whole structure standing. Imagine standing in a storm. The wind wants you to react, to move, to fight it. But the Stoic, they lower their center of gravity. They don't push back. They don't collapse. They root. That's what withholding is. Not silence for the sake of pride, but silence as a strategy, as protection. When someone misunderstands us and we choose not to chase their approval, that's withstanding. When life doesn't go our way and we don't spiral or dramatize, that's withstanding. We are not obligated to explain our soul to everyone who knocks. Not everyone deserves access to our depths. Sometimes the most sacred things are the ones we refuse to throw into noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself, not for applause, not for praise, but to withhold the chaos and return to center. The world will always demand more content, more reaction, more explanation, but strength is learning to give less, when less protects what matters most. So here's a question. What if you stopped giving every piece of yourself away? What if you kept some things for you, your peace, your time, your stillness? To withhold isn't to hide, it's to honor. It's to say, this is mine, and not everything that's mine must be shared. Because in a world that shouts, stillness is a stand, and in a world that demands, refusal is a form of power. Energy spreads. We don't just walk into rooms, we shift them. If we carry stress, people feel it. If we carry chaos, they catch it. But if we carry calm, we disarm the whole room without saying a word. That's the quiet power Stoics cultivated, not just for themselves, but for everyone they encountered. Because calm isn't just for peace, it's for leadership, in war, in grief, in crisis. The calmest person becomes the anchor. They're the one people watch. When no one knows what to do, they're the one who holds steady. So others remember how to breathe. And this calm, it's not genetic, it's not magic, it's built through mourning stillness, through choosing patience over panic, through refusing to let the outside world dictate the inside one. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's what calm is, mastery, not of others, but of our own emotional weather. Imagine someone screams at you and you respond with nothing but eye contact. No defense, no insult, just presence. That stillness, it rattles them more than rage ever could, because calm isn't emptiness, it's density, it's gravity. It holds more weight than noise ever will. Most people think intensity moves the world, but watch what happens when one calm person walks into chaos. Everything softens, everything slows, everything recalibrates. That's what calm does. It doesn't control others. It invites them back to center. So be the one who doesn't react. Be the one who slows the pace. Be the one who reminds others that rushing doesn't solve, yelling doesn't win, and panic doesn't protect. In a loud world, calm is contagious, and in a world of copies, it makes you unforgettable. Stillness doesn't mean silence, it means signal. In a world of static, it becomes the clearest message. We think we need to speak to be heard, but some of the most powerful statements are made without a single word. A breath instead of a breakdown, a pause instead of a punchline, a look instead of a lecture. Stillness is not inaction, it's the highest form of intention. It's saying, I've already chosen my response, and it's peace. The Stoics weren't passive, they weren't weak, they were precise. They didn't waste words, didn't waste time, didn't waste emotion on things unworthy of their soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote books in fragments, not to impress, but to remember. He knew that truth rarely needs volume, just consistency. And stillness, it's the ultimate consistency. It shows up in the storm, it holds line in the noise, it becomes a mirror, reflecting who's reacting and who's ready. When we stop trying to convince, we conserve energy. When we stop defending every move, we gain clarity. Stillness becomes a filter, a boundary, a way of saying, if you want access to me, match this energy. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. It's no longer performing to prove, but existing to protect. So the next time the world demands a reaction, try giving it stillness. Let your breath be your answer. Let your calm be your closure. Let your energy speak louder than your explanation. Because when you stand in stillness, you don't just walk in truth. You become the kind of truth that doesn't need to speak. It's already felt. Not every compliment is truth. Not every praise is love. Not every spotlight leads to growth. Sometimes, what lifts us is also what cages us, and the real strength is knowing who we are without needing the world to clap for it. Lesson 5. Praise is not a mirror. We grow up craving praise, a good grade, a pat on the back, a like, a follow, a "you're doing great." It feels like fuel, like proof that we're enough. But what happens when the praise stops, when the applause fades, when the room goes quiet? Most people panic. They chase the next validation. They overextend, overperform, overexplain. Not because they want to grow, but because they want to be seen. The Stoics saw this trap a long time ago, and they warned us. Praise is not a mirror. It doesn't always reflect your worth. Sometimes it reflects someone else's mood, their bias, their agenda, their need for you to be something that fits their story. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, don't value what doesn't come from within. Because he knew praise feels good, but dependence on it is a form of slavery. Think about it. If we only feel valuable when we're approved, then every disapproval becomes a threat. We become puppets to perception. We tailor our truth to please the crowd. We say yes when we mean no. We smile when we're breaking, because somewhere deep inside we believe praise, love, and rejection to death. But here's the Stoic truth. Praise is external, character is internal, and if we confuse the two, we lose ourselves. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." We think that applies to money, but it applies just as much to attention, to validation, to applause. Some of the most liked people in the world feel the emptiest because the likes didn't fill them, they only distracted them. So the next time someone praises you, accept it with grace, but hold it lightly. Don't make it your identity. Don't make it your oxygen, because the moment we need it, we're no longer free. The Stoic path isn't about avoiding praise, it's about not depending on it. Let character be your compass, not compliments. Let peace be your reward, not applause. Let purpose guide you, even when no one's clapping. Why do we crave praise? Because at some point, we were taught that being loved means being impressive. Being accepted means being approved. Being enough means being seen, so we perform, we polish, we perfect, we shape ourselves into what others want until we forget what we actually are. But Stoicism asks a different question. What if we stopped chasing the mirror? What if our value had nothing to do with how we're seen and everything to do with how we live? There's a difference between being valuable and feeling valued. One is stable, the other shifts with every room we walk into. When we attach our worth to praise, we give strangers the power to decide who we are. A boss says, "Great work," and we soar. A critic says, "You've lost it," and then we spiral. We ride the highs, we crash with the lows, and we forget that the world's opinion is not a compass. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. He could have soaked in praise every day, but instead he warned himself, "Fame is emptiness." Why? Because fame is shallow. And the truth is deeper than that. Truth is how you live when no one's watching. Truth is how you treat people who can't give you anything. Truth is what stays when the applause dies out. When we build from the outside in, we become fragile. One negative comment shatters us. One rejection unravels us. But when we build from the inside out, we're anchored. Seneca wrote, "A good character, when established, becomes a shield. Not a trophy, not a stage, a shield." So maybe the goal isn't to be celebrated, it's to be solid. Maybe the highest form of confidence is walking into a room, knowing who you are, and not needing anyone to agree. Let others praise, let others criticize, but let you stay grounded, rooted, unshaken. Because when identity comes from within, it can't be taken from without. That's Stoic, that's real, that's freedom. There's a subtle difference between self-worth and ego, and it shows up most clearly. When we receive praise, the ego says, "Finally, they see me. Keep it coming. Let's do more of whatever gets us liked." But the Stoic self, it doesn't swallow praise. It nods and moves forward, because acceptance to a Stoic is quiet. It doesn't need to be shouted. It doesn't need to be fed. It just is. Imagine building your entire sense of identity on applause, on numbers, on algorithms, on feedback loops. Every shift in opinion becomes a crisis. Every lack of reaction feels like rejection. That's not living, that's performing. Stoicism offers another path. Do what is right, not what is loud. Not what wins praise, not what gets reposted, just what is true. And sometimes truth doesn't trend. Sometimes it's misunderstood. Sometimes it's quiet. But the Stoics remind us it's not the volume of truth that matters. It's the consistency. Think of Epictetus, born a slave, taught others as a free man. He didn't write to impress kings. He spoke to shape minds. He didn't crave applause. He craved clarity, and that became his freedom. There's a reason Stoics journaled, not to gain followers, but to gain focus. Because writing for yourself is the fastest way to meet yourself, and that self, the one beneath all performance, doesn't beg for praise, it breathes in peace. Seneca warned, He who depends on public opinion for his happiness will never be steady. Because what the crowd gives, the crowd can take. So here's the challenge. Next time praise arrives, welcome it with grace, but don't make it your anchor. Say thank you, then return to your path, unchanged, because self-worth isn't loud. It's not decorated, it's not fed, it's felt. And if we're doing this right, we'll need less and less from the outside to feel whole on the inside. Gratitude is powerful, but not all gratitude is clean. Sometimes what we call thankfulness is just hidden attachment. I'm so grateful they chose me can quietly become I hope they never stop choosing me. We confuse appreciation with dependency, respect with validation, support with self-worth. And without noticing, our peace becomes conditional. On who notices, on who praises, on who claps. But the Stoics had a different model. They practiced gratitude without attachment, grateful for the gift, but not defined by the giver. Grateful for the moment, but not chasing its return. Grateful for praise, but not hungry for it. Because they knew attachment is fragile, but presence is unshakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." It sounds simple, but it's one of the most liberating truths we can hold, to receive fully, without letting it own us. To love deeply without losing our center, to appreciate applause, but not depend on it to keep walking. Think of it like this. Gratitude says, "This matters to me." Attachment says, "I can't live without it." And once we cross that line, we're no longer grateful. We're gripping. The Stoics let life flow, not because they were cold, but because they were clear. They knew everything is temporary, moments, people, praise, status, and they trained themselves to let beauty pass without needing to possess it. That's real gratitude, when we can say, "Thank you for this," even as it leaves. So when someone praises you, breathe it in, appreciate the gesture, then release it. Don't store it as proof. Don't let it become your identity, because the things that truly matter don't need to be clung to. They stay, they return, they echo. Be grateful, be grounded, and above all, be free from needing it again to feel whole. Approval is addictive, and like all addictions, it starts small. A compliment, a like, a nod of recognition. It feels harmless. Then suddenly, we're chasing it. Not truth, not purpose, just the next sign that we're okay. But here's the hard truth. Approval is a moving target, and the moment you aim for it, you stop aiming for yourself. Stoicism doesn't reject being liked. It just refuses to be owned by it. Marcus Aurelius ruled millions, but in his journal he never asked, "Do they admire me?" He asked, "Am I living by reason? Am I aligned with what is right?" That's the Stoic test. Not, "Do they approve?" but "Am I true?" Because sometimes being true means being alone. Sometimes it means misunderstood. Sometimes it means people walk away because they loved the version of you that performed. But Stoics don't perform. They practice. They live by principles, not applause. Approval feels good, but it doesn't last. It can't build a foundation. It can't hold you when everything falls apart. Truth can. Truth is what remains when you're not impressing anyone, when no one's watching, when nothing looks glamorous. Truth is the quiet you meet when you stop trying to be liked and start trying to be whole. Seneca said, "Live among men as if God beheld you. Speak to God as if men were listening." Why? Because integrity is alignment, even when no one's clapping. It's easy to become who people cheer for, harder to become who you can respect when the crowd goes home. So here's the call. Let truth define you. Not numbers, not trends, not praise. Let the measure be stillness, the compass be clarity, and the reward be peace. Because truth won't always be loud, but it will always be enough. And when you build a life from it, you don't need a stage to feel seen. You just need a mirror and the courage to look into it without flinching. Most of what hurts us, we picked up and carried ourselves. old words, unprocessed pain, stories that no longer serve, but still speak louder than truth. And maybe the work isn't to fight them, but to finally let them go. Lesson 6. You are not what happened to you. Most pain doesn't come from what happened. It comes from what we believed about it. The event ends, the words fade, the person leaves, but the story, we keep telling it, over and over, louder, darker, sharper than it was, and soon, it's no longer just a memory, it's an identity. I was abandoned. I was rejected. I was overlooked. Eventually becomes, I am unwanted. I am unworthy. I am invisible. That's the danger of pain unexamined. It becomes permanent, but the Stoics offer something radical. We are not our circumstances. We are our choices in response to them. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He wasn't ignoring trauma, he was freeing us from its grip, because if we are only what happened, then we're stuck, powerless, defined by things we didn't choose. But if we are how we respond, then we have the pen again. We can rewrite it. You were hurt, that's real, that matters, but you are not just the hurt, you are the healing too. You are the courage to show up again, the voice that says, let's try, the breath between the spiral and the stillness. The Stoics believed this. The past is data, not a destiny. It informs, it doesn't control. We can look at what happened, hold it, learn from it, then put it down. We don't heal by denying the story. We heal by refusing to let it define the next chapter. So when the old pain whispers, this is who you are, you answer, that's who I was. Then take a breath and write something new. We don't carry our past. We carry the meaning we gave it. Two people can live through the same event. One breaks, the other builds. Same moment, different meaning, different future. That's the power of the stories we tell ourselves. And most of us, we didn't even write the first version. Someone said we were too much, so we shrank. Someone said we were not enough, so we tried to earn worth. Someone left, so we made it our fault. That story gets replayed, refined, internalized, until it's not a chapter, it's a script, and we live it without ever realizing we can rewrite it. The Stoics were masters of this. They knew the only thing worse than suffering was suffering twice, once in reality and again in imagination. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, because most of our pain doesn't live in the moment. It lives in memory, and memories become stories, and stories become identity, unless we interrupt the cycle. So how do we do it? We step back, we pause, and we question the script. Who told me this meant failure? Is this belief even mine? Would I teach this story to someone I love?" That's where the shift begins. We don't lie to ourselves, we liberate ourselves. Not by erasing what happened, but by refusing to keep bleeding from it. There's a version of us that doesn't flinch when the past knocks, not because we forgot, but because we finally looked it in the eye and said, "You no longer decide for me." We still carry something, but now it's a new story. A story where the pain didn't vanish, but it didn't win either. A story where we are not victims of the past, but authors of what comes next. And in that choice, in that rewrite, is where Stoicism becomes freedom. So the real question isn't, what happened to me? It's, what meaning have I given it? And even more powerfully, is that the meaning I want to keep? The past is a teacher, not a residence. But too many of us still live there. We visit the moment, we unpack the shame, we rehearse the mistake until it becomes home. But the past is not built to hold you, it's built to show you. And the longer you stay, the more you forget what the present even feels like. We say things like, that's just who I am now, as if the past carved it in stone, as if growth isn't allowed. But the Stoics, they saw time differently. To them, the past was a lesson, the present, an opportunity, the future, irrelevant until earned. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The present moment is all we ever have," because he knew freedom isn't found in revisiting what we can't change. It's found in showing up fully where we are. So why do we stay stuck? Because pain is familiar. Because the past doesn't ask us to risk anything new. Because there, we know what to expect, even if it hurts. At least it's predictable. But healing? Healing is uncertain. It asks us to let go of who we've been, without knowing who we'll become. And that takes courage. The Stoics didn't ask us to forget. They asked us to reframe, to look at the wound and say, yes, that happened, but no, it doesn't own me. The past can inform your strength, but it can't define your identity unless you let it. You're not the person who was left. You're the person who stayed standing. You're not the one who failed. You're the one who chose to try again. You're not what broke you. You're what grew in spite of it. So when your mind drifts back, don't fight it. Don't hate it, just whisper, thanks for the lesson, but I don't live here anymore. Then come back to your breath, to your body, to the part of you that's still rebuilding, even if the world hasn't seen it yet, because the moment you stop dwelling, you start deciding, and that is the real beginning. Pain can end you, or it can shape you. It depends on what you do with it. Most people try to escape it, numb it, avoid it, wrap it in distraction, in noise, in speed. But Stoics, they do something else entirely. They use it. They sit with the wound, trace its edges, ask it questions. Then they turn it into power, because power doesn't come from never being hurt. It comes from what you choose to build after. Think of a blacksmith. The fire doesn't destroy the steel. It molds it, and if we're willing, pain can do the same to us. Pain exposes what we relied on, what we avoided, what we assumed we needed to survive. And in its place, it gives us something better: clarity. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." Because pain shows you where your walls are, where your limits live, where you gave yourself away too easily, and that's where the rebuild starts. Not in forgetting what hurt, but in fortifying the parts of you that needed it. Every rejection teaches boundaries. Every loss teaches letting go. Every betrayal teaches discernment. The pain didn't just burn, it revealed. And once we see clearly, we're dangerous in the best way. Calm, rooted, unshakable, because what once broke us becomes our blueprint, not to repeat the hurt, but to rise differently next time. The Stoics didn't glamorize suffering. They honored what came from it. They knew life wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about refusing to waste it. So the next time the hurt resurfaces, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What can I build with this?" Because if it's going to cost you, let it cost you forward. Let it make you stronger than you were, wiser than you hoped, and more grounded than the world expected. That's how pain becomes power. When it's no longer something you hide, but something you hold with pride. At some point, we all face a decision, not about what happened, but about what it means, because we can't choose the wound, but we can choose the weight. We can't erase the moment, but we can decide what version of us walks out of it. And that decision, it's not made once, it's made daily. In how we speak to ourselves, in what we believe is possible now, in how long we stay where the pain first hit us. Most people hand that decision away to the past, to the people who hurt them, to the silence that followed. But Stoicism hands it back. It says, this is yours. Your interpretation, your direction, your identity. Marcus Aurelius never let the chaos define him. He was surrounded by war, disease, betrayal. Yet in his journal, he chose calm, he chose clarity, he chose character, because the final say is not in what breaks you. It's in what you build after. We don't get to rewrite the pain, but we do get to reclaim the pen. To stop telling the story of how we fell and start telling the one of how we stood back up. So ask yourself, what am I still letting define me? What voice in me still sounds like the past? And more importantly, what do I want to believe instead? Because this isn't about denial, it's about direction. The Stoics didn't look away from the hard things. They just refused to be ruled by them. They looked at the storm and said, "You don't get to tell me who I am." And neither does your past. Not the one who left, not the moment you broke, not the silence that followed. You are not what happened. You are what you decide it becomes. So choose with power, choose with clarity, choose as if your future self is watching, because they are, and they're hoping. You don't just survive the story, you finish it on your terms. The world won't slow down, people won't always change, and life won't ask permission before it shakes us. But that's okay, because real power was never out there. It was always in how we hold ourselves when everything else starts to spin. Lesson 7. Control the inner world. The world is noisy, messy, unpredictable. People disappoint, plans collapse, life moves fast and sometimes without mercy. And the more we try to control it all, the more exhausted we feel. Because control, at least out there, is mostly an illusion. You can't control what they say, what they think, how they respond, how long they stay when they go. You can't control the storm. But Stoicism says you can control the anchor. That's the shift, that's the power. Not to calm the chaos, but to become the calm inside it. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to control the empire. He wrote to control himself. He couldn't stop betrayal or war or death, but he could stop the spiral inside, the assumptions, the ego, the story that would have made him reactive. And that's what Stoicism trains us to do. To draw the line between what is ours and what never was. Your thoughts, yours, your breath, yours, your choices, yours, your character, always. Everything else, borrowed, passing, outside your jurisdiction. The Stoics call this the dichotomy of control. Two buckets, what you can influence and what you can't. And suffering happens when you confuse the two. You try to fix someone else's emotions. You overthink someone else's judgment. You relive a conversation that's already over. And every second you spend out there, you lose clarity in here. But what if you just came back to your breath, to your posture, to your presence? You don't need to fix the chaos. You need to stop letting it fix you. You don't need to win every debate. You need to stay in alignment. You don't need to force peace out there. You need to protect it inside. That's control, not of the world, but of your response to it. And when you master that, the world can scream, and you stay still. It can reject, and you stay enough. It can storm, and you stay grounded, because real power isn't loud. It's disciplined. It's knowing. I may not choose the waves, but I always choose how I stand in it. We carry too much, not because we have to, but because we never learned where we end and where others begin. Someone's in a bad mood. We think we caused it. Someone doesn't respond. We assume we upset them. Someone disapproves. We start questioning everything about ourselves. But here's what the Stoics knew. Not everything you feel belongs to you. There's a line between what is yours and what is theirs. Their expectations, not yours. Their wounds, not yours. Their reactions, projections, disappointments, silence, still not yours. We confuse empathy with ownership, kindness with compliance, compassion with self-erasure, but Stoicism teaches a different model. Be kind, be present, but don't carry what isn't yours. Because when you do, you start to shrink. You adjust your truth to fit their comfort. You edit your voice to avoid their judgment. You trade clarity for peace that doesn't last. And the cost is your center. Epictetus said, keep your attention focused entirely on what is truly your own concern. Because attention is energy, and energy is life. And every time we pour it into someone else's reaction, we lose a piece of our power. That doesn't mean we don't care. It means we care better. with boundaries, with awareness, with clarity. You can love people without absorbing their pain. You can help without overextending. You can show up fully without losing yourself in the process. Draw the line. This is my truth. That's your opinion. This is my peace. That's your chaos. This is my responsibility. That's your pattern. Not everything that enters your space needs to stay in your hands. Let them feel what they feel. Let them carry what they've earned. You've got your own load, your own growth, your own path. And if you're always carrying what's theirs, how will you have strength left for what's yours? Control begins with distinction. Freedom begins with separation. So the next time you feel the urge to over-own, to over-apologize, to over-fix, stop and ask, is this mine? If it's not, put it down. With peace, with love, and with power. Every storm looks different on the outside, but inside, there's always a center, a place untouched by wind, by noise, by fear, still silent, unmoving. You have that place too. You were born with it. You've just forgotten how to get there because life teaches the opposite. React fast, defend quickly, match chaos with chaos, be louder, move quicker. Don't let them get ahead of you. But the Stoics, they moved the other way, inward, downward, deeper. They knew the storm could only break you if it pulled you away from your center. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, loss, war, but in the middle of it all, he wrote himself reminders. Know where you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. That's the Stoic art, returning to the still core again and again. No matter how loud the world gets, you don't have to match it. No matter how cruel someone is, you don't have to harden. No matter how fast they move, you don't have to rush. Inside you, there's a version that doesn't panic, doesn't spin, doesn't chase, just observes and acts when the moment is right. That's your anchor. That's your inner citadel, and no one can take it unless you forget it exists. Most people live outside themselves. In headlines, in group chats, in what's trending, in who's clapping. So when the storm hits, they fall with it. But those who practice stillness, they bend, they don't break, because their roots are below the surface. You don't need to escape the storm. You just need to remember who you are inside it. You don't need to silence everything around you. You just need to stop letting it define your next move. That still core, it's not a fantasy, it's a skill. Built breath by breath, choice by choice. Every time you pause, instead of reacting, every time you hold your posture, instead of defending your ego, every time you breathe deeper when everything tells you to panic, that's you, remembering, reclaiming, returning. So, when the next storm comes, don't ask it to stop. Ask yourself to stand, not loud, not flashy, just firm and still. There's a moment so small you could miss it. A breath, a pause, a split-second gap between stimulus and choice. That's where your power lives. The Stoics built their entire practice around that moment, because what you do in that space determines who you become. Most people react, instantly, emotionally, automatically. They defend, they attack, they spiral, and then they justify it. I had no choice. They made me do it. That's just who I am. But Stoicism says, no, that's just what you've practiced. Reacting is habit, responding is discipline, and discipline begins by stretching that space between what happens and what you decide next. Someone insults you. Do you swing back, or do you sit and see what it reveals? Someone triggers you. Do you take the bait, or do you examine why it still stings? Someone disappoints you. Do you withdraw love, or do you stay rooted in your own standard? Epictetus reminded his students, it's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them. Meaning, it's never the thing itself, it's the lens we look through, the story we add, the assumptions we stack. And that story, you can change it, not later, now. You don't need to explode to be powerful. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need to defend every boundary with rage. You can hold the line with calm, with breath, with unshaken presence. This is not passivity, it's precision. It's refusing to let temporary emotion ruin permanent alignment. So how do you respond, not react? Breathe first. Ask what's true here. Just ask what's mine to do. Yes, then act if needed. And if nothing is needed, let stillness answer. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't get dragged out of character. That's what makes a Stoic powerful. They don't let the outside world hijack their inner one. They pause, they filter, then they move. Not because they have to, but because they choose to. And in a world that thrives on reaction, that choice is revolutionary. The world changes fast. People come and go. Plans collapse. Dreams bend. Sometimes they break. But what never has to fall is the world inside you. Your thoughts, your focus, your character, your response. That's yours, always. And if you build it right, it becomes your shield, your sanctuary, your weapon. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, a fortress no one else could enter. Not with lies, not with pressure, not even with praise. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal from his closest men, but in his journal he reminded himself, no role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you happen to be in now, because he knew the outside doesn't have to be perfect for the inside to be powerful. That's the Stoic advantage. While others chase peace out there, you cultivate it in here. While others scream for change, you become it. While others fight for control, you master the one thing no one else can touch: your mind, your mood, your movement. So how do you make the inner world strong? You simplify, you subtract, you say no to what doesn't serve the soul. You choose stillness over speed, clarity over approval, intention over impulse. You journal when others scroll. You pause when others pounce. You reflect when others run, and over time, that stillness becomes strength, that strength becomes safety, that safety becomes who you are. People will try to pull you, challenge you, project onto you. Let them. Your work is not to control them. It's to hold your center so steady, they either calibrate or walk away. Because not everyone is ready for your calm. Not everyone will understand your pause. Not everyone can meet you in stillness. But that doesn't mean you leave it. You protect it. You return to it. You make it the strongest place you know. And when the world storms again, as it always does, you don't have to brace. You just come back home. If you've made it this far, you already know. This wasn't just a video, it was a mirror, a quiet walk back to the place we forget most: our own mind. Stoicism doesn't give you hype, it gives you honesty. It doesn't make life easier, it makes you stronger. No tricks, no shortcuts, just discipline, direction, and the daily decision to come back to what matters. Not the noise, not the praise, not the story someone else wrote for you, but your response, your presence, your power. So before you scroll away, pause. Ask yourself, what's one thing from this video you can actually practice today? Not someday, not when life is calm again. Today, leave it in the comments, not just for us, but for you, to claim it, to start it, to live it. Because this isn't about being stoic once. It's about becoming someone who holds that stillness. Every time the world tries to take it away, we'll be here, every step forward, every breath back to center. Until next time, stay grounded, stay real, and remember, you already have what it takes. Just protect it.